Maybe it's a good time this morning to remind you that the people that wrote the Old Testament scriptures and those people that set out to gather those scriptures into the Bible as we know it today did their work in a total different worldview than the one that we have today. It was a worldview years and years apart from where we are in this modern world of today. In that worldview, the natural terrors like earthquakes and drought and thunderstorms and flash floods, which is still in those areas today, and even mental and physical illnesses were attributed to the god of the time, and normally in a way of saying it's punishment, so it's your fault that all these things happened. And that is incorporated in the wisdom of the day and in the scriptures. Now I wonder who of you sat up straight this morning when we had that quick thunderstorm around 5 o'clock and thinking, oh my goodness, what have we done wrong to have all this thunder and lightning over our city? It's not the way we do things anymore, because we have a different worldview. The roots of this worldview lied in the view of who God is or who God was for those people. And I put up this picture to show you kind of a combination of how those people thought about their God. There were two important gods in the pantheon of the Canaanite people where the Israelites found themselves in the early years of the forming of the nation of Israel. These two gods were represented by nature. There was a god of war and a god of thunderstorms, and then on the other side there was a god of, like a fatherly god, a god of compassion and a god of love. The war god or the storm god in the Canaanite pantheon were called Yahweh, and the love god and the fatherly god was called El. And if you go and read the Old Testament, you would find both these names within the original Hebrew scriptures. Sometimes God is called El or Elohim when it refers to the whole pantheon of gods, and sometimes God is called Yahweh. And as time went on, these two gods became one. So you had this storm god, this warrior god that holds the lightning in his hand, and yet that can turn around and be this love and gentle and peaceful fatherly God. Because that's the origin of this God. We have to have some sympathy with the people of that time, because we understand that because of their different worldview, they did not understand things like we do today. We have the science today to explain to us where lightning comes from. We also have the science to explain to us mostly where most of our diseases comes from, or where disabilities that we have physically or mentally originate from, and we do not attribute it anymore, like they did in the Old Testament time, to either an evil spirit or either to the God of the time punishing the people that did not listen to him again. And according to the priestly tradition, and according to many prophets, this was the way the people engaged with their God. It was this deity with certain characteristics, and they feared this deity because he let those characteristics loose upon them whenever he felt it was needed. Marcus Borg wrote a book, and it's called Speaking Christian. Now, I love Marcus Borg because Marcus Borg asks the uncomfortable questions within Christianity, and he makes you think when you read his books. So a couple of years ago, Marcus went to a college in Oregon in the United States, and he realized that most of the young people, the students there, was not your usual church goers. They just didn't go to church anymore, and he wondered why. So he started with a questionnaire, and he went amongst these young people and said, when you hear the word Christian, what comes up in mind? What is the immediate thoughts that you have when you hear the word Christian? their reply was maybe surprisingly, maybe not. Because they replied in this word. The word that comes up when we hear the name Christian is literalistic, anti-intellectual, judgmental, self-righteous, intolerant. Where are the words like wisdom that we've read from in Proverbs 9, verses 1 to 6 this morning? Where are the words of compassion? The words like love? The words like, let me turn the other cheek? Those are not words that the ordinary young people out there speak or think when they hear the word Christian or the name Christian. And that brings us to a halt this morning. To ask, why is that? Why is it that the view of people outside is so different from our own view of who we truly are? And I have to say to you this morning, the way we see ourselves is not the way people outside the congregations of our church sees us. Because that's the question that Marcus Borg asked them. How do you see these people that calls themselves Christians? And you heard the words that they came up with. And maybe it is because most of our effort and most of our energy goes into the priestly worship of God. Because that is the way the Old Testament were written. You had to go to the temple. You had to bring certain offerings. You had to do certain things to please this God, because otherwise he will strike you with a lightning bolt, or he will strike you with a disease, or maybe a flood will take you away. So this priestly worship thing that was created kind of create the church of today. And that's why we are here this morning. We are busy with priestly worship. And it depends on where you go. If you go to a more traditional church, which I presume the United Church of Canada is, you will have certain characteristics. You will see the candles. You will see the communion table, pews. Some churches go as far to take out the pews and put in chairs. There's certain music playing. There's certain robes certain ministers wear. Certain colors for certain phases of the year. And you are in trouble if you put up the wrong color here on a specific Sunday, because certain people will definitely notice that and bring you to order. And that's how we are. Because we use all these wonderful things, and there's nothing wrong with them per se, to create a feeling or to create an atmosphere where we can worship God, where we can connect with this God. And if we go on and if we go and have a look at the more evangelical or more Pentecostal churches, they have exactly the same elements in their services. They just do it differently. There's more technology and lights and different instruments and louder music, and it's more focused around the pastor standing in front, swaying the Bible in his right hand and preaching to the people the gospel of Jesus Christ. Also, it's been created to create a feeling, an atmosphere, and there's a science behind most of these churches. They take you on an emotional trip, and at a certain stage in the worship service, they send around the collection plate. These priestly traditions we have to ask this morning, because that is what the outside world sees when they look at us. Do they have meaning for us? And is it something we need to keep on going with, regardless of what the outside world think of us? Because, and that I'm really honest about this morning, if the gathering of a congregation, they come together within a worship service, does not change your life so that you will live your life differently outside, it has no meaning whatsoever. And that is very important. Because Jesus himself had quite a negative view upon these priestly traditions. He rarely went to the temple. He rarely went into the synagogues. He gathered the people out in the fields and taught them there. He preached where the ordinary people were, in the streets. He touched the lepers. He mingled with the so-called people you do not mingle with. He was not afraid to show his service to others. He did not hide in a building and isolate himself from the world out there. He was there, and he went there. And he had a word or two to say to these Pharisee and Sadducee and scribes that wanted to keep the tradition of the priestly services at all cost. These laws that they created and that they wanted everybody to live accordingly to. Public show of religion is dead. It doesn't have any meaning. It doesn't speak to a modern world out there, because people out there do not fear the lightning this morning at 5 o'clock to be the hand of God anymore. They do not understand that illnesses is the punishment of God. They see it as a biological thing which we can tell you where it comes from through science. That's the world we live in. And therefore this, what is happening here this morning, is kind of disconnected from the world out there. Except if we get the people out to come in and to share in what we try to do here. And that was also the message of this guy, Martin Luther. He had 95 points against the then Roman Catholic Church, saying exactly what we are talking about this morning. You're a church with rules and regulations, you mean nothing in the world out there, other than installing fear and collecting money. Because that tradition comes from the Old Testament. You know, to pay homage to this storm and warrior god, they had to bring their sacrifices. They had to bring, in the later Roman Catholic Church, their money to pay for their sins. It's always this bring the riches to convert or to change this God into the El God, the loving Father, the compassionate Father, the one that have grace and mercy upon his people. What does it tell us when we read in the Old Testament this morning what you have to eat this week? How you have to behave yourself as a woman in society? What hygienic rituals you need to do after the biology of this body takes its course? What does it help to read about how you treat your slaves? How you treat your neighbor when he killed your ox? Because that is so far away from intercontinental missiles, nuclear warheads, changing your DNA. That is so far away from radiation cancer treatment. It's worlds apart. The Old Testament doesn't speak about that because the worldview were different. And when we are stuck in an old worldview that doesn't speak to the modern world we live in, we are labeled as judgmental, not intellectual, and all those names the college students in Oregon said. Because that's the world we have created through religion. And we build it upon the clever men of our history. So Proverbs is attributed to Solomon, the king and the son of David. And when we speak about Solomon, and I say the name, I wonder what comes up in your thoughts. Maybe wise man, a wise king. Maybe the book Proverbs attributed to him, right or wrong, as it may be. Maybe the most successful king because he built the temple, the first temple in Jerusalem. So that's the kind of things that ordinary religious people would think when they hear this, the name Solomon. But there's a surprise this morning. This was a deeply flawed, self-serving human being. When his father David died, Solomon was showed out between all the sons as the power-hungry one. He must become king. Although he wasn't the eldest, tradition have it, the eldest son will follow the father. So to overcome that problem, Solomon arranged the murder of Adonijah, his eldest brother, his own brother. Let him be killed. Solomon, yes, built the beautiful palace and the beautiful temple in Jerusalem by implementing taxes on the poor people of Jerusalem to the extent that he pushed them into poverty. Solomon, as you know, and we don't speak a lot about this because it's not appropriate, had how many wives? How many concubines? How many mistresses? I don't even think he himself knew the number to those people that he saw on the streets, and if she's lovely, he took her in. Now she's mine. That is a self-serving king and not a wise king. Solomon had a couple of wise words for us, definitely. We've read some of them in the book of Proverbs this morning, chapter 9, verses 1 to 6. But did he himself follow those advice? Did he himself live according to that? And that is the same question we ask ourselves. Are we a self-serving community as Christians, saving our asses from hell just to be here and just to pay homage to this thunder and war and warrior God? Or are we here to listen to what Proverbs is actually saying? It says 7 pillars of wisdom. Now, if you speak to some people, it would be ethics, humility, instruction, discipline, knowledge, integrity, honesty. If you speak to another church group, it would probably be prudence, knowledge, discretion, understanding, resourcefulness, counsel, and power. Different structures for this wisdom that the book of Solomon or the book of Proverbs is speaking about. But the highlight of chapter 9 comes in verse 6, where it says, "Leave your simple, immature ways and you will live. Walk in the way of insight." So what is the advice? It is not centered around do what God is saying, follow the dogma of the day, go to worship services, or anything like that. It is human-centered. It is brought from this wide Jewish tradition to the heart of every human being within that tradition, saying, leave your simple, immature ways and you will live, walk in the way of insight. Now that is wisdom we can start to follow. That is wisdom that we can have when we look at global trading, global finances, the fear of a collapsing dollar in the USA. When we look at communicating with your mom 15,000 miles away via a mobile phone. If you said that to people 2,000 to 3,000 years ago in the Bible times, you would be able to speak to your mom 15,000 miles away. That was just like, what a crazy character, just forget about him. And yet here we are, doing it every day without even thinking about it. So there should be a wisdom that comes from that tradition in Proverbs chapter 9 that guides us, that leads us today, that is relevant to our day. Because traditionally the church went and they took the rules and regulations of the Old Testament and they made it dogma. And they say, this is the way you should live, even if it's 3,000 years old. Even if they thought the world was flat, standing on pillars, and it's the center of the universe, and the people on the world is the center of the universe. And then we start to realize something changed. And what changed? This changed. Because now, according to Proverbs 9, according to the advice in verse 6, says, leave your simple, immature ways and you will live. Walk in the way of insight is your responsibility. It is your work within yourself. It is your journey of faith. It is your relationship with God. It is not the church or the minister, at least not the minister, thank goodness for that, that needs to get you in heaven. Sorry, that's not part of my job description. But I'm here to inspire you to journey with me on a journey of discovery, on a journey of let us ask the difficult questions. Let us delve into these things that doesn't make sense so that we can make sense out of it for 2024, not for 1,000 and 1,500 years before Christ, for today. And let that wisdom speak to us here and now. And that is your own responsibility to do that. To ask the questions maybe with me, or for us to journey together, to explore, to discover, and to really see. Not just to look, but to see. Not just to hear, but to really listen. Not just to feel, but to have that compassion. So that we can change our ways to the one law that is above all law. Do no harm. It's so easy, yet so difficult to do. Do no harm. Love wastefully. I love that saying from Bishop Spong. He passed away about, 10 years ago. Wrote lovely books. If you see John Selby Spong, take the book and read it. It's like Marcus Borg. You will come out of that book with many questions, but you will come out enlightened. You will come out a different person, because he brings these wisdoms in a different way, and that is what priestly services in the Church of Christ need to be, to lead you and to help you and to guide you to a new consciousness, which we call the Christ consciousness, to a new understanding and insight, which we call Christ wisdom, to a new way of life, which we call love. And if it doesn't do that, it's not worth the while. Amen.